Okay, I've sent this note out a couple times. I think I sent it out by email through Blackboard and also through the Facebook group. There are a few seats left. I think there's like, five or six seats left. So if you haven't signed up already, one of the professors here, Jonathan Gladstone, works with Bank of Montreal, and he's organizing and hosting a tour. So I'm helping him kind of coordinate this at the data center in Barrie here. So this will be on the Thursday morning, March 15th, from 8:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. So you'll need to sign. You'll need to get the tickets are free. They don't cost anything. It's easy to get to by our transit bus system if you don't have your own method of transport. But it should be pretty cool. It gives you you'll get a tour of the facility. You'll get to talk to some of the people who manage the facility there. Learn a little bit about what they do there. So kind of gives you a sense of what a kind of a professional space like that is like, and what a world-class facility like that is like, and you get to meet some really cool people, right? That's always a good thing. So if you haven't signed up and you're interested, I mean, what a great way to meet folks, what a great way to network, and to see some good, there's some awesome stuff going on right here in Barrie. You don't have to go, you don't have to leave for the city to work at some great spots here, and and you could do a lot worse than working at a large Canadian bank. So they need all kinds of help with application development and all kinds of things. So anyway, so check that out. It'll be in your email, the link to this, and or you can just go to Eventbrite. It's public. Make sure if you come though, bring your student card, because you'll need your student card and also personal identification to get in, because you will be going through a security check because it's a tier 1 data center. So make sure you bring your wallet with you and your Georgian student card. Had that little thing there, so that's cool. That's all right. Yeah, 53. So there's 7 tickets left. So yeah, they won't last very long. That is March 15th, I think it was. Yes, 8:30 a.m. It actually starts at 9, but you'll need to go there. You'll need to be there at 8:30 for the security check. So anyway, yeah, I'll be there. I'm going for sure. I want to see it. For the last few years that Jonathan's run, I've missed it. I was like, really want to go and see what that's all about. So I'm going to hang out there as well. I've got myself a ticket. So yeah, come on out, check it out. Where else are we at here? Okay, so where did I load Blackboard on? Did I fire Blackboard up on this thing? I did, yes. So spark up Blackboard and turn edit mode off. So make sure with your weekly learning, I've moved a few of the decided to pay attention to some of the user interface principles, and I've moved some of the more frequently used links up here. You'll notice on the navigation, I've moved those around. So your weekly learning assignments, screencasts, and your grades are all up top and center. Make sure in the weekly learning that you're going through, so after the fact, for example, last week, there's a required reading, right? So make sure you're getting that done, and make sure you're completing the quizzes. They're going to help. There are a couple of tests in this class, right? We're going to have our first one in 2 weeks. I think the syllabus is a little off kilter because we missed a week because we had study day. So anyway, but those quizzes will help you a lot with that in-class test. Okay, so if you haven't, circle back and do the quizzes. You can do those anytime. The required reading is from developer.mozilla.org, which is our kind of virtual textbook, but as well from from the most excellent book on JavaScript, Eloquent JavaScript. So leaf through this. It's a little bit more in depth. There's a little bit more reading than the MDN, but it's fun, and it's kind of tongue in cheek. There's a bit of humor, and it's a really well written book. This is it's kind of a pre-release of the book, so they've made some additional changes. So if you find anything that isn't quite right, be sure to send the author some suggestions. So he's looking for feedback. But it's arguably one of the best books on programming, period, let alone JavaScript. But it's about JavaScript. So leaf through that, and you know, I'm finding as time goes on, I'm finding myself removing textbooks from courses, and I think you guys appreciate that. I don't think people like buying a textbook and then having maybe, you know, the course maybe doesn't make use of the entire textbook or only parts of it. I don't think people particularly appreciate that. So, and I'm finding anyway, by the time a book hits press, it's probably out of date. It's probably out of date by about a year, right? Because of that process where things have to go. So I'm more and more I'm using resources that are kind of just slightly ahead of their time and maybe not in a digital format. I think you can actually, I think you can buy this book, Eloquent Drive. I think you can buy it but I don't know. I don't know if you can get it, the third edition yet. Anyway, continue to do that. Get those quizzes done, right, as well. So let's go to weekly learning. This time is Module 5, Functions. So what I'll do, I've just got the lesson files in lab. Later on this week, I'll post a quiz. I'll post those. Follow up with me. Check back again. Pick up those readings, and I'll give you any other direction too. So let's start with the lesson files. Start files. Pull those down. Don't need the Mac system folder. So we should have inside there, you should have an images directory. Actually, we don't need that. That's pulled that from our last week. So you don't need that. But anyway, it's there. But what I've got here is I'm concerned with there are 4 HTML templates and a style sheet. So you should have that. Custom functions, return, and scope. I'm going to use a different, I'm going to use at GitHub Atom today, just to kind of mix it up a little bit for fun. And we'll open up a folder, pull that. And we'll start with the template called Functions. I always have trouble with the wrap for whatever. Toggle soft wrap. No, I guess my wrap's not going to work on me. One thing I do want to encourage you that I've been kind of struggling with cross-platform stuff, as I always seem to do. I don't know why. I spend a lot of time doing cross-platform work. At the bottom here, you'll see a few little, doesn't matter what editor you'll probably notice at the bottom right, there'll be some interesting metadata about the file, and they'll show up in links. So for example, this one, of course, is the file uses UTF-8 encoding. But also you'll see there's probably a little character that says LF or it says CRLF, right? So if you click on that, and what this is basically, because there's no such thing as a plain text file. It actually doesn't exist, right? We've kind of talked about that from time to time, but files only exist in ones and zeros. So what happens is when you're formatting text, when you create a new line, so you go into a new line, you hit enter. On different operating systems, when you hit enter, different things happen. on a Windows machine, in order to go to a new line of text, it inserts a carriage return character and a line feed character. If you remember that old typewriter I dragged into class, so the carriage return would be like sliding that whole thing at the top, ding, over to the side, and starting to the left again, tapping out those letters. The line feed is where you roll the paper roller up and advance the paper to the next line, right? So the weird thing about this is Mac and Linux, when you hit enter, they only insert a line feed character. So if you create a text file in Mac or Linux and then open it up in Windows, everything will appear on one line. And this is why. So if you, in Windows, the default is when you hit an enter key, it creates a carriage return and a line feed character. And Windows is looking for that when it formats text-based files like HTML or anything like that. So I would encourage you, having a carriage return character won't hurt code editors or text editors in Mac or Linux, right? But it will, without the carriage return character, that may look weird on Windows. So I would encourage you, no matter what platform you're on, to change that to carriage return line feed for everything. Then it makes your text files more cross-platform. And I think if I'm going to go into the settings here. Editor, invisibles. I'm going to show indent guide, show invisibles. Wrap lines, I'm going to put soft wrap. That's cool. So I'm going to, most of them have this, but I'm going to show the invisible characters. I'm going to show the indent guide and soft wrap. See this? So I go back to my functions here. Oh yes, I don't know if you can, it's awfully bright. I don't know if you can see that there. Can you see? Maybe I'll zoom in it. This is a little thing, and I know I'm dwelling on this, but this will catch you up. The devil sometimes really truly is in the details. This little thing here, this little circle with it looks like a turtle. So I don't know which one is which. I think this is the carriage return character, the little line on the right, and I think that's a line feed. I think. Pretty sure, because it's like the knob on the typewriter that turns things. So, but Adam's the only editor I've seen that actually renders the line feed character, or the both of them, the carriage return and the line feed. I'm not exactly sure which one is which. This is the only one that actually shows them on the screen when you go show invisibles. That's why Adam is awesome. It's awesome in other ways, and they're all good, all the text coded, but this is the only one. If anyone finds another editor that can actually render the carriage return and the line feed characters, I want to know about it, because this has tripped me up a few times. So there you go. There's your public service announcement for the day. Set your files to CRLF all the time. It's an easy way to just solve all those problems. Okay? Cool. Now that I got that off my chest, I get nuts about crazy stuff. It does matter. It's one of those little things. Okay. So today we're going to look at functions, and we're going to build some really, really cool stuff today. So you're going to, by the end of the day, you're going to realize what kind of power you wield now, even with the little bit of JavaScript knowledge that we have in our back pocket. We can do some pretty cool stuff, and we're going to finish the day by building an application that is super cool, where you've got 3 color sliders, and you'll be able to adjust the red, green, blue on color sliders, change those, and actually modify the color of the page using those 3 channels and using simple color sliders. It's super cool. So we're going to get a sense of really today that we're capable of building applications now, right? Even in the front end without the server at all. This is just front end code. So, but to do that, we have to understand a little bit more about functions and when to use them and what they're for, and how we can make them, how we can make them really flexible and really help us to reduce code. Because I don't want you guys to write a lot of code. I want you guys to write smart code, right? And I had a quick peek at some of your assignment ones for the CNC StoryMaker, and I was really impressed. Like, you guys are, that's super cool. I think you guys are doing a great job. So, anyway, so I don't want you to write that. Functions help you to write less code, and that's the idea. We don't want to repeat ourselves, right?
Sorry,
Sorry?
Module 5.
Module 5, yes. Yep. Yeah, sorry, because we're out of whack because of the, I know. I used to put week 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I realized that was hopelessly confusing because then when you got out of step, right? Module, yes, module 5. Okay, so, and for whatever reason, I can't get my word wrap to work on Atom. I thought, well, yeah, okay, it works. It doesn't work to that. Oh, that's the arbitrary line where you wrap your text to. Okay, so it is working. That's cool. Okay, so that's the idea. So with a function, what you want to do is you want to look for bits of code that you are typing again and again and again. And if you type something, the same kind of routine in your code more than once, you probably should isolate that code and put it in a function. Then you don't have to do it again. You can just simply call the function up, maybe pass it some variables, and get something back, and then you can reuse it, right? So we define or we build a function. If we use it, that's called invoking the function. If we send it along, if the function needs other information in order to do its job, we send it along variables, and those are called parameters, right? And so then it can perhaps return different information depending on the situation. But the thing we want to be aware of now is once where we've been using variables and arrays and whatever so far, most of them have been global in their scope. So they've been available throughout your whole script. When we get into function, we have to manage something called scope. And that means not all variables are available to every other part of your script. They may be only available to you, those values, within certain blocks of code. That's called scope. Okay, so anyway, let's head here and we're going to talk about, first we're going to we're going to talk about the difference between a function and a method. And a lot of times I use these interchangeably and people use these interchangeably, but strictly speaking, they're not. There is a difference between a method and a function. So a method, for the purposes of JavaScript, when we talk about a method, those are things that are built into the JavaScript language. So things that it's not a function you write yourself. It's already there. You just use it. That's what we call a method. So for example, one of those is the replace function. That is a method. So so step one here. Let's just say here we'll create a var. So we'll say var text equal to. We'll say functions are awesome. Some. Stop. I'm gonna pull this. I think there's a bit of glare on the wall here. I love the sun. Seems so sad. I love it. Nice sun. That's better. Maybe you can see the carriage return and the line feed characters there. How many people use? Does anyone use Atom regularly as their code editor? No, not really. No. Testing it now. Testing it now. How many people are? Sublime's really popular. How many people use Sublime? A lot. Yeah, a lot of people use Sublime. Visual Studio Code seems to be. Yeah, people love that one. I get it. That's a really good one too. I use that a lot. But try different ones. Like go out and fire up brackets from time to time. You never know. You'll find little features on each of them that are like super awesome. And you might use one for some jobs. You might use another for when you get into certain other types of files. So you might use different editors for different things. Okay, so let's use the replace method. So we'll say var new text. New capital text equal, and we're going to say text dot replace. We'll replace the string awesome, comma, with amazing. So the replace method accepts two parameters, the string you're looking for and what you want to replace it with. Okay, but this technically it is a function, but we call it a method, so that it is built into and usually methods. Most code editors are going to the syntax may be different. The syntax coloring may be different for method versus a function that you build. It may not. It depends on the code editor, right? So we'll go ahead and go in console.log new capital text. So let's see if we replaced this thing. So we should get functions are amazing in the console. So save that. Head over to, I'll use fix it up. I'm going to use Firefox today. No, console. I'll zoom this up to the console. You can see what well, that's not good. Oh, hold on a second. There we go. That'll do. That's fine. Okay. Cool. So that's all right. So so let's go ahead then and create a function under here. We use the keyword function, right? And we're going to create a function called make capital H1 capital red. It will accept nothing. Open up a brace, close the brace. So even if your function accepts no parameters, this one, of course, accepts 2. We punch that in there. And so we'll say, let's say var h1 is equal to, and we'll say document dot query capital selector. And we'll target the h1 element up here. We're going to grab that, change the color. And then we'll say we can now refer to that h1 as simply h1, and we'll say the style property dot color property equal to, and then we'll pass in a CSS value as a string, red. I could put an RGB value in there. I could put a hexadecimal value, whatever it accepts. Since I'm directly modifying the CSS with style dot property, whatever that is, that's a string. So anything any value that is supports in CSS would go in there. Cool. Okay, we save that. That refresh screen. That won't do anything because unless I invoke the function, it just sits there. It's sitting there waiting to be used, right? So in order to invoke the function, I can just say make h1 red. Good to go. Another thing that is, and we've seen this stuff before, but we're just going to kind of delve into it with a little bit more detail today. So there are named functions which we assign a name when we create them or define them, and when we invoke them. There are also anonymous functions. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire up and show what an anonymous function looks like. So oftentimes, like things like event handlers will use anonymous functions. So for example, so we already have here as a var, the step 2 button is we're going to grab the element with the ID step 2. So that is the button up here. So I'm going to build an event handler, attach it to this button. Step 2 button dot on click equal function. Open up the brace, close the brace. So this, technically, this function here, this is what fires. It's invoked when the button is clicked. So technically, although this is a function, everything I put in here is a function, it has no name. I haven't given it a name, so it's called an anonymous function. One without name. So we'll just say alert space anonymous. Simply create an alert. So you'll have to reload the page, then hit the run function button, and you should get an alert box if everything's cool, or an error in the console.
What are the empty brackets for?
In the function here,
Yeah.
you can pass in some variables, which can then be used within the anonymous function. Generally speaking, an anonymous function it's kind of like a quick and dirty, right? Whereby, I mean, you could build the function elsewhere and bind it to the on click if you wanted to, but sometimes then you're just making more code. You're adding bloat to your code. Sometimes it makes more sense just to write the function right there, and attach it to the click event, right? So there are other instances where an anonymous function might be just a bit more efficient. I guess that's style to some degree, but yeah. So if we have these, you put these when you're crafting a function, when you're defining it, you put these in the sense. You put these together, and they have the pair of empty parentheses has a name, and I've forgotten it now. I'll have to look it up. It's in Marjan's book. I'm forgetting what he calls it. It's also in the MDN. They give it a funny name, but without that, this is what the name plus that kind of makes for the function, right? It kind of sets the way for passing in things. So similarly, we can do a named function. We can say function, in this case, step to capital alert, right? And I say alert named function invoked. Step to pass nothing.
So why don't you have to do like you just did with step to alert there after the function was written? Why did you have to do that with step one?
Why didn't I have to do that with this one?
Yeah.
Because it's bound to the on click.
Okay.
Yeah. So this will call the function. This will invoke it. The click action invokes it. If I just put this as so, I then have to kind of like this one up here. Just writing the function doesn't do anything. It's just sitting waiting. I have to invoke it manually then. So in this case, if I do that, that one, the named function is going to fire, right? Because it's been invoked. This one waits till I click the button. Step 3, function parameters. Okay, so Sometimes some functions or methods don't need any parameters. Some of them do require parameters to work. And some parameters are optional. They'll function with or without parameters, right? So here's an example of something with no parameters needed. So if I say var, let's create a variable random, var random is equal to, and if I say capital math dot, I'll use the random method. I don't need to, whoops, semicolon, console.log random. The random method doesn't need anything. It will generate a pseudo-random number between 0 and 1. We'll take a look. Okay. No parameters needed. So the replace, say var function capital text equal, use single quotes, my random number is x. Okay. And let's create, so I'm going to say var, let's manipulate that string, var new function capital text is equal to function capital text dot replace. In this case, I'm going to replace the capital letter X, comma, with another, which is, I'm going to replace this with random. Now, this time I'll output function text, because new function text. New function text.
So no matter what, you need the, I guess, apostrophes on the other side of random, even though it's not a string.
Sorry, even
because you're calling a number, do you have, like, so within the replace brackets, do you need the apostrophes around?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't. In fact, I broke the code. You're correct. That's a variable. I've only had one coffee today. So be aware. Something doesn't look right, it's probably not right. Reflog that page. Yeah, okay. Notice how everything hangs up with the alert? Those drive me crazy. And output we go. So in this case, this method or function needs 2 parameters. Some parameters are optional, right? So you can pass them, or some functions have parameters. They're often you can pass them stuff, or you don't have to. If you don't, it'll just kind of do certain things for you. So we're going to look at the join function or join method as an example. So let's create a simple array. Var, we'll call it lunch array. Okay. And the lunch array is we're gonna have say spicy is the first string. Bean and burritos. How's that? Wait, these would be at this hour of day. These are breakfast burritos. I didn't get enough breakfast either. There you go. So our array has 4 elements: the spicy, bean, breakfast, and burritos. Watch your syntax.
Questions? The math function, math random.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why it never goes to full number? Only.
That's just the way the function works. Like, so if you wanted to get, say, an integer or a whole number out of that, you would use the math.floor method. And oftentimes with random numbers too, that's what we're looking for. So you'd floor to get, you'd multiply it maybe by, you'd multiply it by 10 to get like, because it's from 0 to 1. You multiply it by 10, and then you either round it down or round it up.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what you need the random number to be. Sometimes you might want an integer. You might want a negative number. Maybe you make it negative. It just depends, right? It's not a true random number either. It's what we call pseudo-random. You'd have to ask a mathematician why that is. I've tried to wrap my head around that, and there's just not enough coffee to get that done. So, yeah, it's not true random like rolling the dice, but I think it's for most purposes, it's good enough. So our lunch. So we have a simple array called lunch array. So let's create, let's say var lunch, and we'll use the dot join. So we'll equal, and we'll say lunch capital array dot join, and I'll pass it space. I will actually pass it. That is, I am passing it a value, which is a space. Okay, even though it looks like nothing. And then let's spit that out to the console. So that becomes what that will do is we'll join each of those pieces of the array in one string, and use these whatever you pass in there as the delimiter or the separator. Oh, I've broken something. Missing before functions, line 51.
You did an equal sign.
What did I break?
Equals.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Thank you. Spicy bean breakfast burritos. Good. So, but if I leave this, so I can do the same thing. So let's change it. We'll create another string. We'll call it var lunch2 equal lunch. Notice I haven't modified the original array, so I can still use it. Lunch array dot join, and I'll pass it nothing. I'll pass it anything. I have to put the empty parentheses, but I don't pass it any parameters or variables at all, strings or anything. I'm going to comment out that crazy, this crazy alert here. I'm just going to. Let it stop firing. There's the new lines of code. We flog that, and we should have, so if I pass it nothing at all, it says, okay, well, you didn't tell me what you wanted, so I'm going to put in commas for you. There's a default. So, right, and if you're not sure, about a method or a function in JavaScript. Joins all elements array into a string and returns this string. Right. So with the syntax here, if you see, here I'll zoom this up a little bit so you can see it a bit better. When they offer you the syntax for, so you pass it in an array, dot join. This square brackets in the syntax means this is optional. So when that's the way that syntax works, right? So this means that these characters mean something. This means you don't have to put a separator in there if you don't want to. Optional. Very cool. All right.
When I did it, didn't separate by commas.
You just put it all together with one word. Browser you're using. Oh. See if I can recreate that. Oops. Come back here. All right. Huh. Maybe you could be using a different version of Chrome. This one's locked down. It's pretty old. Yours will be more up to date than mine.
Yeah, probably. My Chrome uses commas.
Yours uses commas, so I don't know. It's not kicking out a syntax error? No, just running the code.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Go back to your code. Even though that is empty, so you're technically passing it a null string. The null string is still a value. Believe it or not.
Oh,
right? So what you're saying is separate it with absolutely nothing. So it's actually doing exactly what you want to do. What you're asking to do. Yeah, actually, that's a good one. So so here in this case, if you do this is interesting. I hadn't even thought of that, but you might technically think of like just adding a null string as passing it nothing, but you're actually passing it an empty string. So if I do that, that's really cool. Let's go over to, if I do that and refresh it, yeah, it'll pass it as a separator, an empty string, which actually might be useful in some cases. You may want to like crunch everything together. Depends on what you're doing, right? I hadn't even thought of that. So there you go. So that is technically passing a value. This means passing no value. Cool. All right, cool. So next we're going to move over to scope and look at how variable scope is affected by functions. But first of all, it's 8:55 and you probably deserve a coffee. So go and beat the lineup at Tim Hortons, get yourself a coffee, and we'll go look at scope. I'm going to do it. I'm going to pass it.
Good morning, you okay? What's turn? What's turn? What?
Like you're looking at me like
Oh,
you're trying to imply
something.
I ASC a
I'm almost done.
Almost.
and I exported it. I made it safe for web. If you just go to the export menu, it would understand, and then it comes away. What's the Oh.
You just save it as AI or I. Sure, yes, one of those was a PDF or.
I was thinking about making something like it, but I don't know. Time or patience. Good. I've only just started. Like the first 6 videos last an hour. What is JavaScript? JavaScript and Java. Things like that.
Is the file that we're supposed to use for the lab already in this folder?
Yep. Yep. All right, let's roll. And make sure we get everything done on time. So let's fire up the next one called scope.html. And I'll also open up same in my browser here. Link to the style sheet, first of all. Forgot that link. Save that. Just good. Don't need to scale that up quite as much. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Scope. So this is tricky, and this is something that's going to trip you up quite a bit. If it doesn't completely make sense with this little walkthrough here, that's okay. You'll get better with practice, but variable scope and understanding and appreciating when a variable is available to you and when it is not, and when you have to pass it along. This is something that is really super important, particularly when it comes now to functions. So I guess, for lack of a better term, I'll call them our two primary kind of scopes are our global and our local variables. So a global variable is a variable that is declared in the script, and it is available everywhere. Hence the word global. So we'll do that. We'll create var x equal to 1. Okay. So I've put that directly inside the script element, or directly inside the .js file. Once we, of course, and understand too, we're scripting directly in the HTML. The only reason we're doing that is because it's very easy then to refer up to the DOM to look at the HTML that we might be manipulating. But when you're done, I'm going to, once you get into a production sense, you extract all of this, any CSS and JavaScript out, and you put them in their separate files, right? So I'm operating under that assumption that once you're done and you move into, but when you're building out templates and widgets or interfaces or little applications or whatever, forms, oftentimes it's helpful to have certainly the JavaScript, and I find the JavaScript and the HTML together, and maybe sometimes the styles as well embedded in the page. So that's we'll call X our global variable. So step 2. Now we're going to build a simple function that contains another variable. So we're going to call this function A. Function A. We'll put the parentheses in, open up the braces, and inside we're going to create var y. I'm going to declare var y, and I'm going to initialize that to value 2. You'll see why in a minute. So this function is declared and initialized, or this variable y is declared and initialized within a function within the main script. Okay. Now we're going to do another one. So step 3, we're going to build another function, very similar looking function, function b, and inside it similarly we'll declare variable x equal to the number 3. Oops. So that's cool. Now what we'll do here is I want you to take a look at this function here. So I built this for you. The function is called output, and the function accepts one parameter. Okay. So what happens is when this function is called, whatever is passed to this function, it then receives the variable name value. Okay. So even if I pass it a different variable name, it now becomes the variable name value for the purposes of this function. So then what I'm simply going to do is create an H2 element. So I'll call that, I'll give it a handle or a reference as LM element. We'll create an H2 element, which doesn't currently exist on the page. We just have our H1, right? So I'll create a new element. I'll then insert that into the DOM. So how you do that, you create it, you have to do two things. You create it and then you insert it in the page with append child. So on the document body element, I'll append a child node, which is LM element, which is an H2. So that will actually create the LM element in the page. And we'll see that when we look at the element, the node tree in the console or the dev tools. And then what I'll set the text of that H2, the text content, and I'll say the value of variable is, and I'll concatenate whatever was passed to the function. So if I call output and I pass it the number 3, then this will output in an H2. Value of variable is 3. That's all this does. Okay. It accepts a value of some sort, and it spits it out as an H2 element on the page. Okay. That is step 4.
So if you ask it, like, and you get that function, all in that function, like if you asked function output to ask function B, then would that second say value of variable is?
I don't, that's a good question. I don't know if I could inject that. And if the function returns the variable, otherwise it's not available. So it has to return it. Well, I'll get into returning values out of when you invoke a function. I'll get into returning it, but I don't think so because then we're again into a scope problem. Anyway, so okay, so let's go here. So save this. I'm going to go Control Save. So step 5, what we're going to do is we're going to output. We're just going to pass to the function output the variable x. So I'm going to pass the variable x, which is a global variable, into this function. Okay. So refresh the page, and in the console, I guess I'm down here. I'm going to say output. And I'm going to pass in x. Okay, so that creates that H2, and the value of x was 1. So what happened was that called this function. It passed in x equal 1. It created the H2, appended it to the DOM, and spit out the string like that. No problem. Okay. Now we're going to try and output y. So I'm going to pass, here's the variable y equal 2. I'm going to pass that variable to this function as well. So I'll go to here and I'll say output, and I'll pass that in y. Y is not defined. Okay? So I don't have access to that variable. It is buried in a function. It is not global in scope. Okay. What about x? We'll try x. Let's call up that function output. Use the output function, and I'll pass in the variable x. Or sorry, Z. Output Z. That is also not defined because unlike X, which is a global variable, this should be var Z. Y, Z, sorry. That should be Z. Change that to Z. If I steered you wrong. X, Y, Z. That's what I meant. I haven't finished my second coffee, so that's my excuse. How's that? All right, so Z is also buried inside a function. It's not global in scope, so that will not work. Okay, so we have access to this. We don't have access now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add output Y as a line inside function A. Okay, so what I'll do here, inside function A, I'm going to call output, and I'll pass Y in the function here. I will actually call this function from inside the function A because inside the function, I have access to variable Y. So I can grab it and call this function, passing it Y, and that should generate this. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll invoke this function A and see if function A will call up and pass variable Y into this. So go ahead into your console and we'll say, oh, I have to refresh the page. And I'll call up function A. A, undefined. What do I do? Function A. All right. I won't put it into the. I'll actually put it into the. Let's put it. We'll put it right here in the code. We'll invoke it right here. A. Reload the page. And then I get it. I have access to that variable. Because I called the output function from a place where the scope of Y was in, that variable was in scope. Okay? I'll do the same thing with function B. So function B, I'll use from inside this function, I'll call output, and I'll pass it the variable Z. So because I'm calling it from within this function, variable Z is in scope, so that if I call function B, this output should call that and spit it out. So we'll go here, and we'll change this to B. Reload the page, and indeed, I've got access to that variable. Okay. Now, what if I swap these around? Just to really monkey with things. Why don't I say I'm going to call output Z for function A. So I'm going to try and access this variable here from this function here. It's not a global variable, but maybe because this is a function and this is a function, I have access to variable Z from over here. So I'll call function A again. I'll call it up here, A. Oh, Z is not defined. So you can't, you have to, if you're making use of a variable and passing it out to another function, it has to be from within that function. These variables Z and Y only have access to, or they're only accessible within those functions, not from other functions, or not from elsewhere in the script, unless you pass them out. Now, for function B, I can call up variable X. That means this may seem strange, but because this is a global variable, I can grab x equal 1 from within this function. So if I call it function b, I should output number 1. Go down here and we'll change this again to call up function b. Because that is a global variable. So that's cool. Cool. All right.
Is the console still supposed to be giving us?
Yeah, I guess so. You can't get y to work?
Yeah.
Hang on. I'll bring the code up here. Yeah, so A, as I have it here, should fail because it doesn't. The function doesn't have access to variable z. It's another function, so it should fail.
I'm just trying to output y though, and it won't let me.
Output y here from function A, like that. Just check semicolons, end of line delimiters. Maybe there's a space after A in the function here. You don't want that, although I'm not sure if that matters. I think it does. I can recreate the problem. Y is not defined. Oh, sorry. A.
It just changed, but it's still saying it.
Oh, y is not defined. A. Function A. Output y. I've got the same thing.
I'm confused now because it just changed on my screen, like it changed the value of the variable, but it's still saying this is not defined. So like, how is it even putting the value of the variable? It's saying it's not defined.
And if I spit it out here, it's like if I invoke it directly in the script, it works. But for whatever reason, are you using Chrome or Firefox? Yeah. So for whatever reason, I can't call it this directly in the. Oh, now it works. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know what I did or didn't do. Yeah, I don't know. That's a head scratcher. I don't know. I recreated it. I got it to fail, and it didn't. It's called it undefined, and then I don't know.
Working if my B is working wrong.
And A doesn't.
B doesn't even tell me that.
And B, what have you got in B? Output var equals Z. So if I output Z, this works here like this. Is that what you have for function B? Yep. Refresh, make sure the page is refreshed. B. Yeah, I get undefined in the console, but it does run the function and pass the variable in. So yeah, I don't know, not exactly sure what is undefined. That's I don't know. Could be. I'll try and find out what exactly it's reporting as undefined, because it's accessing the variable properly and running the function, but the function isn't returning anything. Maybe it has to do with returns. I'll find it. Maybe you know what, when we do returning a value from a function, we'll run it through this and see if I get the same undefined. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a bit strange. It probably isn't strange. It's probably totally logical, but I just don't understand it. So, okay, so next we're going to go down to step 7. So calling functions within functions. And you're going to do this a lot. Okay, so you're going to have, so go ahead in step 7a. We're going to build a simple function called our main function, for lack of a better term. Not very imaginative. So we'll say main capital function. Like that. Use camel case. And this will simply declare and initialize a variable. My value is equal to, and we'll just say 1. That's all it will do. Okay, so now I'm going to create a subfunction. Function, sub capital function. So, and what this will do is this will console.log. It will value. I'll create a string here. R my variable or my value. Sorry, my value is equal to. I'll put a space, and then I will concatenate the variable my value, where I declared it up here. So subfunction will console.log my value here. Okay, now, of course, what I'm going to do is inside main function, I'm going to call the subfunction. So after I declare the variable, here, I'm going to simply call up subfunction. So I'm actually calling this function within the same function that I declare the variable. So I should have access to this variable because I'm in scope. So I'm going to call subfunction from within the main function, and the subfunction will spit out the value of this to the console. So we're going to kind of call up main function. Refresh the page, of course. We'll say main function. My value is not defined. Error. Huh? But I'm in scope. But I'm here. I'm calling it from within here. I should have access to this. Here's the gotcha. This function is trying to access the value here at this point. At this point, it does not have access to this variable. Even though we called the function from within this function, it doesn't have access to that. So the solution to this problem is to pass in the variable my value from the function that has access to it. So what I do is I say, okay, I have access to it when I call this function. I have access to this right now. So what I'll do is I'll pass it in at this point. I'll save that. And I'll try it again. Reload the page. And I'll call up main function. Still, but why don't I have it? I sent it along. I passed it along here. Okay. We have to make sure when we build the function that we set it up to accept a parameter. So inside these parentheses now, I have to say, okay, this has to be waiting for, it has to be expecting that when it's called or when it's invoked, it's going to get something. So I have to put some sort of reference or handle in here. So what I'll simply do is I'll put in something called, I'll go value. So I can give it a different name because it may be passed different variables of different names. So I don't care what the name of the variable that's passed, simply that something's going to be passed to it, and I'm going to give whatever is passed to it the name value. But now I need to change this to match this. So these two things here must match. So this means it can accept one value. Now that value in this case can be a string, it can be a true or false, it could be a number, an integer, whatever, doesn't matter. It's just going to grab whatever's passed to it and spit it out here. So I'm calling the subfunction from within the main function. This is in scope right here. So I pass it where it's in scope, it goes along here, subfunction grabs that and spits it out here. So it should be good. Refresh. That's important. So that's the gotcha. You can send along a variable to be used elsewhere in the script. As long as you send it along, you attach it, or you pass it to a function when you have access to that function, the variable's in scope.
I didn't have to pass it.
You didn't have to pass in anything here?
Yeah.
Oh, so if you leave this and then I say, but this would have to stay as my value, right?
Oh.
Right, so yeah, so then it's accepting that. I'll try that.
And remove it from the function. So the one is subfunction. So it's just subfunction with.
Just get rid of this?
Yeah.
You're able to capture it? I don't know if I can recreate it. Did you put my value in here?
Yeah.
Oh, in here?
No.
No.
Just as you have it.
Just as I have it here. And you're able to capture it here.
Yeah.
What browser are you using?
Safari.
Safari and Chrome. Try Chrome. But we found options. Main fails out here. I can't read now. This is Chrome in Windows, so that it's not the same browser technically. Can I see your code?
Not me.
The inside layer being that much.
Oh no, I'm not talking about that, because that still gets on. I'm trying to find like a material that deflects the frosting of the part.
That's pretty good.
Probably could call someone scared. Never go for it, but.
Yeah, turn right. As far as I understand that.
I shouldn't have access. Subfunction shouldn't
It's
have
better
access.
to bring your own bag for your doing that.
That's it.
I'm supposed to be like,
Interesting. So we could again. Should be exactly what I've got up there. Because you're not gonna weird stuff up here.
oh, that was funny.
I'm sorry. That goes under Xbox. I don't know. So the idea is if we're oops, plus value. If we want to use a variable elsewhere, we can pass it, but we have to pass, when we pass that variable, it needs to be, we need to have access to that. So the scope of that variable, I could pass in a global variable here, no problem. But I can't pass a variable that's within another function elsewhere unless I've got unless it's passed along.
So Scott, you could have like another function that's like function second function equals second value 5, and then you subfunction second value and we pass into the subfunction. Well, so
Yeah. You can have a function within the subfunction, and you can pass it along again if you want. You just have to. It's kind of you got to give it a handoff because it's not a global variable, right? Okay, so cool. Okay, so that's cool. So let's take a look at custom dot. This is gonna be cool. Custom dot HTML. Custom dot HTML. Fire this up here. Now it's gonna get a little crazy. So change this to slash. Okay. Button is not defined. Oh. Did I break something? Must have broken something. All right. I broke something already. That's all right. Oh, yes, of course I did. Okay. So custom functions. Let's look at building our own functions here and taking this a little bit further. So I've got a little bit of, I've injected the HTML directly into the style sheet in the head section. So I've got a couple of things. So I've got a class message panel and a class message panel button. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a short script whereby when you click this button, we're going to generate an alert box in the middle of the screen, and it won't be a JavaScript alert. We'll actually create our own HTML element on the page with an alert box. Okay, and we're going to, depending on what values variables we pass to it, we may create an error box or an alert or a caution box. So we're going to do we're going to generate some sort of output on the screen that depends on what the situation is. So we'll have a bit of fun with this. So these, so if we have an error box, it'll be pink. A warning box, it'll be yellow, and by default, it'll just be light blue. So these are, this just styles the button. The close button on the box. So of course you want to acknowledge the box or get rid of it. We're going to create a little X on the top right that you can exit and remove the element. So this is the style for the X out button on the message box. And this, when we generate the message panel, it'll be absolutely positioned, and it'll be totally from the top. It'll be 50% down, left 50% down, and then minus 50% of the width of the element. So this will, all these things here effectively do is center it perfectly in the middle of the screen. And then some text styling, things like that. So all of this is going to be driven by classes. So we're going to add and remove classes to our HTML to apply these styles. Okay, this will make sense once we get going. Okay, so step one, we need to create a reference for the button element BTN, the button, right? So this, I need to somehow be able to talk about this button here. So step one, we're just going to call it var BTN for short, equal document dot query capital selector, and use a CSS selector there, no tricks, such like that. Step one, file save. Great, now we can talk about the button. Step two, we're going to create a function called Displaymessage. Function, display capital message. Open up the brace. Now take the end brace, cut that out, and I want you to go down to the bottom. You see where I've indented the comments? I want you to head down to the bottom here. And where do I close out? I think after step 7B. Yes. So at the bottom of 7B here. Put that down here on line 84. So we open the function on line 56, function display message. We pass it nothing. We open up the brace and we close the brace again on line 84. So all of the subsequent steps will be inside the function. All right, step 3A, we need to create a paragraph element that is referenced by var message panel. So we're going to create a paragraph element. We're going to say var msg panel equal to oh, I missed, I left in step 3 here. Okay, so this is already built for you. Build an on-click event handler. Step 3, build an on-click event handler for the button that invokes the display message function. So when they click this button, the display message function will be fired up. I will pass in 2 arguments. This is a very important message, and I'll also pass in the type of message or the classification of message, and I'll call it, in this case, the default will be an error message. Okay, so that event handler is already built for you in step 3. So step 3A, we need to now create a P element. So we'll say document dot create capital element, and we want a P. Lowercase p. Okay. So now this paragraph that's going to be our message box, we can refer to it as the message panel. We're going to use a paragraph element to create a dialog box. So that's all I need to call it is message panel. Cool. But in order for it to look cool, this paragraph has to have the class message panel, because all the cool styling up here is in my CSS for class message panel. So in order to have all those cool styles, that paragraph element has to have class message panel. We can add and remove a class in JavaScript. In fact, a lot of this stuff a lot of things, a lot of styles that you do when you're adding or removing visual styles in JavaScript, you're actually not effectively changing the style properties. You're actually just adding, removing classes. So you put you style things with CSS, and then you just leave these styles sitting, waiting to be used if you add a class to an element. So in this sense, so we're going to add this class. I'll show you what this looks like. So I'm going to say MSG panel, which is the paragraph element. And we'll use the set capital attribute method, which is a method built in, and it accepts 2 arguments. First attribute I want to add to it is called the class. I want to add a class attribute to that paragraph element tag, start tag, and the value of that class is the second argument for set attribute. So save that. So right now, when we click the button, right, we will call up the display message function. We'll pass it a couple of things. We'll handle that later. But it calls the function. This function creates a paragraph element and adds a set attribute and adds a class attribute to it. Okay, so let's see, we'll refresh the page, or click on the box, nothing should happen. Go to the DOM inspector, see if I can get, I'll refresh, I wonder if I wonder if you'll see the new DOM. I guess that the DOM's not inserted into it won't be inserted into the page yet, no, not yet. So it won't work, nothing will quite happen yet. That's cool, all right. Cool. Okay, so then step 3C, we need to insert the message text into the new paragraph element. So it needs to have some sort of text inside it. So we'll say message panel, MSG panel, dot text capital content equal to MSG text. That's fine. But this still, even if I save this, it won't do anything. If I reload the page, MSG text is not defined. Why? What? Well, when I call the function, right, it's passing 2 arguments. One is the text that I want on the alert, and the second one is the type of alert I want to fire. So if I want to accept these into the function, I need to be able to accept these as arguments. So when I'm creating the function, so excuse me, what I want to say, let's accept MSG text, comma. Let's also accept the MSG capital type as the second argument. So it's going to be expecting 2 arguments to this function. One is the message itself, and one is what type of message is it? Because I'll give it a different color based on whether it's an error or a caution or a warning or whatever it is. So that's fine. Now, of course, I need to append this element to the document body. I've created the element. I've added a class, message panel. I've added a text node to it, I think, if this gets passed in here appropriately. Now I actually need to put it into the HTML. So I use that document.body.append child method. And I need to use the P that I created here called message panel. MSG panel, which is a paragraph element. So although this looks like a lot of code, it's actually half of its comments. It's actually less code than you think. File save. And if everything's cool, when I display the, I guess I have to reload the page. When I click the box, I should get a very important message. So this is creating a paragraph element. And you can see here, I'll reload the page. So watch this. So here's the DOM. If I click this, you'll see this generated that paragraph on the fly, and there it is. And it added class equal message panel for me.
Can you just go back to this one?
Yep. So I've done a number of things here. I've called I've set an event handler for the button up here. And when this button's clicked, I'm going to fire an anonymous function. This anonymous function calls up the Displaymessage function, passes it in what we want to say, and what type of message box it is. I'll deal with this part later. The function just sits waiting for this to be called. When it's invoked, it accepts as an argument whatever you want to say and the message type. I can change this, of course. I can change it to somewhat important message. We'll grab this, and then we'll create a paragraph element on demand, add the class equal message panel so that it'll be styled with these, it'll have a nice gray background, and it'll be sitting right in the middle of the page, okay? Oops, that's not helpful. And then I add the text, which is what I've got here. Add this to the text node, the text content for this paragraph. And then I insert the paragraph append child into the document body of the page. And I say, insert the append child grabs this paragraph element that I just built and puts it in the body. There's a number of steps, one at a time. When we're dealing with raw JavaScript, this can be a little bit, it's almost like trying to tell someone how to tie their shoes. There's, you can imagine trying to describe that verbally. There's a number of steps involved. So I'll save this, and you can see I've changed the message here. And when I reload the page, we'll watch the DOM here on the top right. I click this, class equal message panel, and there's my message. Okay, so if you've got some mistakes in your code, that's cool. Take a look. Make sure you look at, watch the, here's the console here. Look for the error number, your syntax. Look for the line numbers. They'll probably even give you a column number. Another helpful thing is is the code coloring. So if the code coloring looks a bit weird at a certain point in your text, you've probably missed a semicolon or a bracket or something like that. Use things like like balanced braces. So if I put my cursor on this here, you'll see here this coordinating bracket is underlined. So there's visual cues that can kind of help you build out this code. That's cool. So once we generate this, I want to be able to close it, right? They're like, oh yeah, sure, that's cool. I need to be able to kill the element. It's not like a regular alert. This is an actual element in the DOM. So I need to get rid of this. I need to append child when I create it and then remove it. So I'll show you what that looks like. So let's go ahead and create a close button. Step 4A. And basically, this is the same process as we did by building out the paragraph element. We create an element, we set any attributes we want, and then we add any text to that element if necessary, and then append it to the DOM. So 4A looks kind of like this. Var close btn equals document dot create capital element, and we're going to use a button element. Step 4b, we're going to add the letter X to the button. Right? The cool thing about the button element is it's a paired element, so you can. It's not like an input type equals submit. It's actually, it has a start and end tag, so I can actually put text in the middle. So I'm going to say close btn dot text content equal X. Oops. Now I need to insert it into this paragraph in here. So I need to insert it into the document body, but this is cool. So since I already have a reference for this paragraph that I created, I can call it, it's called message panel. I can append the child to this paragraph and I can put it right inside the paragraph. So here's what 4C would look like. MSG panel dot append child. Oops, no, I don't need the close capital BTN. I'm just injecting this button element into the paragraph.
So how does it know you're going into the paragraph?
How does it know that I'm going into that particular paragraph?
Yeah, so because on the other the body.
Right,
So
yes.
You just put the paragraph in there, it's assuming that you're putting it in previous element, or?
No, because I can, that particular element that I created, because there may, what you're saying is I like the question, because there may be more than one paragraph already on the page. So, but I've given this particular one that I created a specific reference. So I can talk about that one in particular rather than other paragraphs that may already exist. So this has a handle.
Okay.
So then I can say message panel, this particular paragraph that I created myself, append that, put this close button inside those P tags. And I'll show you, yeah, because this is, and that's when you, and this is kind of cool. This is really, Chrome does the same thing. So the P's not there right now until I hit this. And then you can see that and in Chrome, it turns purple and kind of fades. And you're like, oh, well, that's kind of cool, right? It creates a little animation. And then like, oh, okay. So now this is actually called, in JavaScript, it's got a handle. So I can inject that. I guess I have to save this page, right? I haven't saved it. Roll save. Now we'll watch the same thing happen. Now it generated, but look, I can open this DOM and there's a button element inside it. So it knows which one to do that. I guess it would be more effective if I put another paragraph in and it didn't receive. So I'll do that.
Well, I didn't realize that you put the message panel to append it to that.
Oh, here.
Yeah. So I didn't even see that. I thought it was still documented.
Oh, okay. So if I put this, if I just did this, if I did that, I can do that, but I'll show you the difference. So I'll reload the page. It's right there. So it didn't go inside this paragraph. It went inside the body. Document.body.append child. There it is, right? So yeah, there's an event attached to that. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, so the only reason it gets this fancy styling in here is because of the CSS. If the button is inside something with the class message panel, it gets these styles. That's why it looks different. So here, I'll put this back the way I had it. Save. And there it is there. Okay, so that's all right. Now we need to build an event handler for the close button that gets rid of this. So when I click this, I want this to go away. Seems fair and logical. So let's build an onClick, and I'll put it right inside the function here. I'll say close capital button dot on click equal function MSG panel dot parent node parent capital node dot remove capital child. And the parent, I want to remove the MSG and null. This is a bit confusing. What this says is, okay, when we click the close button, which is this little X here, I have to, I guess I have to refresh this. So when I click this button here, what it does is it says, okay, we have to go to the parent node. So the parent node of the MSG panel. So here's the MSG panel. The parent node is the body. So then I'm on the body node, and then I'm saying from the body, remove the child message panel, which is this whole paragraph element. So this will just go away. Oh, did I not refresh it? Display. Oh, no, I didn't. Maybe I didn't save it. I didn't save it. Save. Gone. We'll get more. We'll have more practice manipulating DOM elements as we go along. So if that looks a little bit weird and this is a bit strange, that's okay. You'll get more used to going parent child, append child, remove child, you know, and all this kind of thing. So suffice it to say that MSG.panel.parent node is the body, and then we remove the MSG panel itself. That's what we do. Cool. So we step 6A. We already revised we already add. So we've already done. We set the head. Step 6A is revise the function at step 2 to accept the parameter message text. And also, that's cool. We've already done that. We set the head. Okay. Now we're going to deal with the function step 7A. Accept the second parameter message type. So now we have a message. When we call display message, there is also, we're passing in a string called error. So I want to do something with that. So if you look up the CSS, I have 3 classes. Default, which is light blue. Warning, which is lemon chiffon, which is light yellow. And it's better than the standard yellow. And error, which is light pink. So I want to add, depending on whether it's an error, a warning, or it's default, I want to colorize the background color of the thing. So we need to go down here and create some sort of conditional. So down at step 7A, let's create a simple if statement. If, else, if, else. So we'll go if, and we'll say MSG capital type equals exactly error. Open up the curly brace. If that's the case, then we want to say MSG panel dot class capital list dot add the CSS or the HTML class value error. So I have access to this variable message type because it was passed into the function here. So it's in my scope. I have it. So I'm saying if it's error, if it compares exactly to this string error, add a class error to the message panel. And if I do that, and it has the class error, it should be light pink because that CSS is already waiting for it.
What's the difference between using class list and set attribute?
Well, in this case, I could do either one. I could do set attribute class error. In this case, it wouldn't make a difference. You could use that. Yeah.
It would make a difference to replace the message text class.
Let me just see. Oh, yeah, we'll try that. It might overwrite the existing class. So class list add, it's because an element can have multiple classes. This would just append that to the class list. I don't know if the add class, it might just add another class. Let's try and find, I'm going to find it. I'm curious now. Okay, so let's try this. Do that, classless error, reload the page, and if I click this, that should be pink. That's good. So the class equal message panel, and there's a space here, it also equals error. So I'm going to test that. I'm going to say, let's just say, what do we say? Add set attribute. We want to use set attribute class, and we want to set the value to error. So I'm going to try something else. You don't need to do this, but we'll watch and see. Reload the page. I'll see what the DOM does. Yeah, it blew away. It blew away the class message panel. So in that case, I want to add another class element. That was actually pretty cool. jQuery has some kind of simpler methods than raw JavaScript. But
why are you using an if statement though? Because wouldn't you be able to just put down message panel.classlist.add message type? And that would give rid of the if statements?
Could do. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add some more practice with building if statements. Kind of, what do you got? Wax on, wax off? Yeah, like the Karate Kid? Yeah. But I could just simply do that. That'd be too easy though. Come on. So else if, okay, else if, whoops, I have to put this in here. Message type equal to exactly, what was my other one? Warning. You can just copy down line 85. Else, and I'll simply just, the else will leave as the default in this case. Else. But yes, you're absolutely right. I can just add. That should be cool. So there's our error. Now I can change it. And when I call the function up, I can say, let's change it to warning, the other one. The warning, here we go. Class equal warning, and otherwise, if I don't pass it anything at all, it should be default. I guess that's the only good thing about doing this structure. I guess if there's no, it captures if there's not anything passed to it, or if it's a different value. Yeah, it depends on your app. Cool. So we've got one more script to build out. This one's going to be super fun.
Sorry, Scott, I'm getting an error. The message type is not defined
At display message.
Yeah, it's saying line 86.
So line 86 down here, 86. So is it saying message type is not defined?
Yeah, I think I actually might have just. Yeah, I figured it out. Just capital.
Oh, a camel case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Oh, I got it.
that gets me all the time. I find it's kind of crazy because, for example, I find it a little bit inconsistent. So, for example, on click, I always want to put a capital C, but I don't think that works. I don't think that. Yeah. See that. But to me, I always want to put. I think in jQuery the on click is camel case, but it's not in JavaScript. That kind of thing kind of throws me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you gotta watch stuff like that. On click is not camel case. Cool. Okay, so the next thing we're going to the last one is return.html. I've written much of this for you. So come on back. I'll walk you through this, and then I'm going to issue you a short challenge as your lab, and then we're all done. So go and take a breather for 5 minutes or so. Just get up and stretch, and then we'll come back. I'll show you what the lab involves, and you can probably get it done pretty quick.
Looks like you've given us for it.
I shouldn't have. Well, maybe I did by mistake. I was supposed to remove it. Oh well.
What happened with Andre's thing? Here, he didn't initialize as variable y equals 2. Instead, he initialized it as just y equals 2.
Oh.
Apparently, that means that it acts as a global scope.
Oh,
That's
so
why.
the scope was. Oh, he did. So he didn't have access to it.
Like with
Okay.
if you initialize it without using
Var or
var,
Yeah.
that's when apparently it just becomes global as default.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, and also I think somebody was asking about undefined issue. Apparently, if a function doesn't return
Anything.
anything,
Then it's undefined. Oh, okay. Okay, so it comes down to return.
Yeah.
Go back and see the thing, and just go to the. Go back to your code.
Yeah. If you write it without y or e, it answers it.
Okay. Go back. Oh, we'll give dot error there. Dot warning and dot
Yeah.
So how does it know that a message text is display message? The text inside message. How does it know that text?
Simply because when we call it, this is the first argument or parameter. This is the second. So it just matches the two. It's like it goes in there and says, oh, okay, I'm going to assign whatever is in here as var message text. That's it.
Like every month,
Yes.
I'm thinking about the contract, right? Is it gonna be until it adds up to the total value, or is it just 2 years?
2 years.
Oh,
Yeah, you're saving quite a bit on.
I was gonna say like, it's like almost half.
Yeah. It's
That's
well, yeah.
He's telling you that, but he's actually taking half of it for himself.
Did you guys actually know what happened? I was just gonna like change my provider, but he ended up like getting their phone again.
Yeah, just don't go like 40 minutes in order for you to have any service.
No, that's not true. This plan is covered.
Oh yeah, sometimes I don't get the RG.
I'm sure it's cheaper than the road or Rogers.
It's like the cheapest like price is like $60 or something, or about.
I wish I paid $60 a month. I paid 140.
Yeah, I usually do it, but
It's crazy. He's got 7 days plans. He's 110. I'm like, no. Yeah, I'm like, how did you get that? He's like, there's all these over now. Yeah, pretty much. That's your person bullshit.
You have 2 gigs for month for them.
Yeah.
thank you.
It's like a phone plan.
I got my phone and my iPad. My iPad's only $10, so something more like.
Did you do the installments on it? But
I bought my iPad.
you get connected car. Connected car. I heard of that. It's like it plugs into your diagnostics board and gives you like Wi-Fi for your car and track your car and features built into it. Yeah, it's kind of cool. One of my buddies has it. After a long drive, Wi-Fi in the car.
Then my aunt had that, wanted to do Escalade, and she had the Wi-Fi in her car, just like Cadillac, yeah. But, she's like, we use it all up in one trip, like 7 gigs worth, and she's like, okay, I need to get rid of this, like, it's costing me way too much money, like, it's like, so,
7 gigs in one trip.
yeah.
That's crazy.
You must have ended up watching a
It was
movie.
a 2-hour
Yeah,
trip,
it had to have been
so
like
I was
family.
watching Netflix, my little cousin
Oh.
was watching Netflix, and my other little cousin was watching Netflix, and so
Yeah, so
fucking
you guys
cheap.
watch the movie.
I love
Yeah.
it on page. Yes.
Andre buttons.
Awesome, that wasn't the thing, like, I was like, I'm eating sandwiches. I was thinking about like, what call is this? Eating sandwiches.
You can check the times.
That'd be hilarious if they came out and like, you guys have post sandwich, I'd probably do that later. Do my business.
Absolutely would.
Anything big after like me, yeah, fun. Get business in my books.
Wow. It's funny how your game before basically almost 7 beers and 5 shots is where I was just down like a fat kid on seesaw.
Kid on a seesaw. Scott, which file are we working on next? Return?
Return. All right, so the last bit I want to talk about is returning, using a function to return a value. So let's open this up in our front end here. So we're going to, this is called return. Return. Okay, so that's what the return page looks like. I'll give you a tour through what it does. So we've got just basic styles, this basic style sheet here, which just does invoice table. That's weird. I should have removed that. Anyway, just the font. I just wanted the font family to size up the font, and it also sets a transition on all properties over 1 second. So if I change any visual properties on the HTML element, I'll transition those over 1 second, and I'll show you how that works. I size up the font, and the font family is sans serif. So that's cool. The embedded, where are we here? Return. The embedded styles, I've set the background color to black using an RGB channel this time. Okay, instead of just black, instead of a keyword, I'm using an RGB channel. The color of the text, I've used also an RGB channel. So RGB 255, each of the red, green, and blue channels are fully on at 255. They're fully off at 0, making black and white. Okay. I guess I've trumped the transition duration. If there's a change in the background color property on the HTML, it will happen over 0.25 seconds. Okay, so that's all the HTML does. The page does. So I have basically three different range sliders. So an input type equal range. You can define a minimum and max value for that slider and plot that in. So I'm plotting these as to set 0 to 255 for the red, green, and blue channels to change the color of the page. Right? I'll initially set the value to 0. Each of these inputs have their own ID. So the first one is red, the second one is green, and the third one logically is blue. Okay, so these three will control the R, G, or B channels that control the background color of the HTML element. Okay, so how does that work? So first of all, I declare my global variables. So I want to talk about the page background. So I grab the HTML element with a query selector. These sliders, which there are 3 of them, I need those all together as one group. So I use the get elements, use a plural by tag name. So I'm saying grab any element that has a tag name input. This wouldn't work for every. I might have to be a bit more specific with this selector here if I had other elements on the page, but anyway. So sliders now has all three of those inputs as an array. And then the third and final global is the RGB color, which conveniently I can sort as a 3-part array. That's it. So now what I do is I create, I loop through sliders.length. So there are 3 input elements. So this loop will loop 3 times. And for each input element, sliders I, so sliders 0, sliders 1, sliders 2, it will add for each of those an onChange handler. So they're listing, the script is listing for these to be changed. When any of one of these change, it will fire the following anonymous function. All 3 of them, either one. So any one of those will do the same, they'll do the same thing. So the problem is though, when I add an onChange to all 3 of them, I don't know which slider the person is sliding. So I have to capture within this function, right, which is good. This is where we want to do it. I need to grab, what I can do is I can grab, I can use this as a keyword, right? So whatever slider is being actively changed, I can refer to that slider as this, and I can get the attribute ID. So remember, look up at here. This is how I can differentiate between these 3 inputs. So I'll use the get attribute method and grab the ID. So I know which slider they've slid. Okay. The next one is I need to know what they slid it to. So I'll use slider value, and I'll simply grab this, which is the slider dot value. Yep.
So something like what you're talking about there, this, like that.
This is an object, I guess, is not technically. The get attribute is a method, right? But this is an object, and this sense it seems a little bit kind of weird. Like, how the heck does it know? It just all 3 of them are listening. They all have the same anonymous function attached to them, right? So I can. It comes down to contextual. So if I'm sliding the slider with the ID blue, it knows it's this value, the value of this one.
So that would have been our assignment. That is grab whichever button was clicked in that.
That's right. You can loop through them and add and build the same event handler for all of those buttons, insofar as that code is common. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like as we move through the content, you'll look back and go, God, what? Why did you like? I could have made that so much simpler, right? I could have reduced so much code, but that's part of the learning process. Like you're going to see these, you're going to come to these conclusions and go, oh, well, I could improve that so much. You can circle back at the end of this course and take that same app and probably reduce the code base by 90%. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but you could certainly, you're going to come back and say, oh, I could just do. Yeah. So, but yes, if those buttons, if you have a bunch of buttons and they're doing similar things, yeah, just loop through and build one event handler that can work for all of them, as long as you're capturing those variables that identify which one you're doing, because you may be doing different things, right? So I want to grab the value of the slider. That's cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, if one of these is slid, I have a new RGB triplet, right? They've set the red, green, blue values to something else. So I need to capture the changed RGB triplet, right? So I'll use new RGB, and I'll pass. What I'll do is I'll set that to the value of the function Change Rgb. So I've built a function called Change Rgb. It accepts the channel, right, as which slider. So which slider is it red, green, or blue? That's the channel. And it also accepts the value, which is the slider value. So I know whether it's red, green, or blue, and I know whether it's what did they slide it to, right? So capture that. So let's look at this function. So what it does here is it says, okay, I know what slider they slid. I know the value, right? So what I need to do is I need to update this global variable here. I need to change this one, but I don't know which of these I need to change, right? I can't just rewrite this whole thing. I need to know, because I've got a function on any one of those three. So I need to know which of these am I going to update for the background of the page. So if I'll build a switch here based on the channel that was passed in. Is it red, green, or blue? If it's red, update RGB, the first element in the array, to the value. If it's green, the second, and if it's blue, the third. Right? Now and then I don't need to do, in this case, I don't need to do a default in my switch, because it's only going to be one of those three sliders. There's no other way to call that function. And then here's the neat part. So what I need is I need to now, I've updated this RGB array to return new RGB is now assigned to that new RGB triplet. Okay, that's part one. So the next part now is I need to rewrite the CSS for the background of the HTML page. So I'm going to say var new CSS, and actually this, technically I should be doing this. We could add that to line 45. Okay, so yeah, new RGB. So now I need to write that CSS. So if I'm going to change actually manipulate that, I have to actually need to rewrite the CSS. And we can see the CSS at the top here for the HTML element. This is it. I need to rewrite this property with JavaScript. And I can access CSS directly. So here's how it works. So I can say, okay, the new CSS, I've built a function called write CSS, because I'm actually going to write a string for that RGB triplet. I'll pass in the array for the new RGB color that I already got here. I'll pass it in. Let's take a look at write CSS. So this function accepts the new RGB value as an argument. And then I have to start building out the string. So the new color, I start it as RGB round bracket, right? Because I'm building this. So I know that it has to start with that. All the way down here. So it needs to start with that. That's cool. Now I'm going to build a while loop to spin through the RGB array. So initialize with a while loop, I initialize the I at 0, and while I is less than the length of that array, so spin through 3 times. For a new color, I need to add plus equal, so I add on whatever the value of red, blue, green, plus a comma. So I'll scream up here. This is the format. So I spit out the value of the red channel and a comma. The second iteration is the value of the green and a comma and a blue and then a comma. What? A comma? We don't want a comma. Let's see here. Okay, yeah. So at the end, I've put a comma after the blue one, but I don't want that, right? Because I don't need it. I just need, this is the format I'm going for. So I don't need it. So I have to figure out what the length of new color is and then slice off the last. So I want to, from the start, and then I only want to go to the second last character. So I cut off, basically slice off the last comma. Then I add on at the end, plus equal, the finishing. So now I have the format RGB like that. And then I return that string back to the calling function. So the calling function up here gets that new RGB CSS in the value new CSS. And then what I can do is I can say page BG, which is the HTML element, dot style, dot background color equals that. So I've rewritten a string that is the new RGB value and actually use that to directly change the background color property, style property, directly change the CSS. And any changes, and the reason, so that's cool. You'll see how it kind of fades a little bit. There's a little bit of an animation there. The reason it fades, the reason it doesn't snap instantly is because if there are any changes to the background color of the HTML element, that will happen over a quarter second. So the CSS is already waiting for that change and animates it, which is kind of cool. I can do that animation with JavaScript, but why? There's no point. So anyway, so this is kind of a gimme. So what I intended to do, but I made a mistake, I was going to have you build this switch statement here, and I was going to have you also attempt to build out this function here, but I gave you all the answers because I didn't have enough coffee. It's always my if I run out of caffeine, bad things happen. I'm telling you. So anyway, so you get a bit of a gimme for today's lab. Thanks for persevering. I know that was a lot. What I would like to do, what I would ask you though, is I'd like your feedback at this point. So if you could, for lab 5, instead of submitting your code, in the comments function, I'd like you to write, for the lab, I'd like you to tell me one thing that you find the most confusing so far. So one aspect of what is the part of JavaScript that right now that you're scratching your head over? What is it you're just like, I can't, I get this, that, and that, but I just can't wrap my head around X. So I want to tell you, this is called, we sometimes call this the muddiest point. So what for you is the muddiest point? What is the one part of JavaScript that you're just like, I just can't, this just stymies me or just escapes me, right? Whatever that is, I don't care. So give me a little bit of feedback there. Tell me what part of JavaScript has really kind of got you stymied, and I'll collect those and I'll see if I can, maybe there's one particular thing that everyone's kind of like scratching their head over, and then we can kind of go over it and clear that up. So, so yeah, give me a little bit of feedback. Tell me what the muddiest point is so far, and I will give you full marks for your lab. There's your gimme. That's all you have to do for that, right? Hey, you know, some days you win, some days you lose. Sometimes you get a gimme. Today's your gimme, right? So also today, I want you to look for, so this week I'll roll out a quiz. I'll roll out some readings on functions, and I'll deploy a short quiz. So watch for those. I'll let you know when they're up and live. Do those, and we'll see you next week. And I'll also start putting together assignment 2 for you and marking your assignment 1. So look for that feedback as well. Okay. Thanks for playing my game, as always.